Mountain Man Jed, accustomed to loneliness and harsh mountains, sent for his mail-order bride, hoping to find only a housekeeper for his home. But when Ellie, an overweight city girl, completely unfitting his expectations, appeared at his door, he was overcome with disdain and accepted her as an unwanted burden. However, beneath Ellie's modest exterior, she had not only an astonishing strength of spirit and ability to survive in the wild, but also a secret that drew bloodthirsty bandits to their secluded corner. Find out how this unassuming girl managed to win the respect of the stern mountain man, unlock her true potential, and, together with him, find a real treasure that changed their lives forever. This story will deeply move you and show that true value lies not in appearance, but in a person's heart and character. Be sure to watch until the end to discover how this gripping drama concludes. Subscribe and like, and we begin. December 1887. The Sierra Wild Mountain Pass was covered in snow. In his log cabin, smelling of pine and smoke, sat Jedediah Jedstone. He was 35, but rare visits to towns, hermitage, and a harsh mountain life made him look 40. Broad-shouldered, with strong hands accustomed to axe and rifle, he was known in the area as a grim, taciturn hunter and trapper, and also as an unmarried man who avoided women, which was a rarity in these parts. Jed had never been interested in marriage. His life was simple: hunting, trapping, firewood. But in recent years, loneliness had begun to press. He wanted someone to share his home, his life, his silence, not love, but just presence. So he decided. His hands gripped a yellowed letter from Chicago, a reply from a marriage agency. They had found him a bride. The letter included a small photograph, a young woman with kind eyes and a modest smile. Jed, not particularly discerning about feminine beauty, decided she would do. The main thing was that she wasn't too demanding and could endure mountain life. She was due to arrive today. When the stagecoach, creaking on the hard snow, stopped at his cabin, Jed stepped out into the frosty air. Inside him was a strange mix of impatience and apprehension. The door opened, and a tall man, the driver, jumped to the ground. He was followed by, no, not the young woman from the photograph. Standing on the stagecoach step was Eleanora Ellie Mae, about 19 years old, whose figure absolutely did not match the image on the card. She was plump, with a round face and rosy cheeks that flushed with embarrassment in the cold. Her dress, though new, barely accommodated her ample figure. She looked not like a sturdy companion for mountain life, but like an unfortunate city girl who clearly didn't belong here. For a moment, Jed froze. Disdain burned within him. This was not the woman he expected. She seemed weak, unsuited for hard labor, for the harsh climate.
I ask you to like and subscribe to the channel, so you will help me in motivation to make such great stories for you, and I will see that you like them. Enjoy watching, everyone.
She wouldn't survive here, and he wasn't a nanny. A flicker of aversion crossed his eyes. The driver, noticing his expression, grunted and handed Jed a receipt. "Here's your bride, Mr. Stone. Sign here." Ellie, seeing Jed's icy gaze, lowered her head. Her heart tightened with shame. She knew she didn't meet his expectations. Her plump figure had always been a source of ridicule and humiliation. She had fled Chicago from poverty and mockery, desperate to find some place in life. But here, at the end of the world, she again faced the same disdain, magnified by the severity of the mountain man. She knew she was accepted as an unwanted burden, a disappointment. "Mr. Stone?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling from cold and fear. I'm Ellie." Jed merely nodded, abruptly took her single, heavy, worn satchel, and silently entered the cabin. Ellie followed him, feeling the cold wind cut to her bones. Her hopes for a new life crumbled before her eyes, leaving only the bitterness of disappointment. The first few weeks were torture. Jed virtually ignored Ellie. He woke before dawn, went hunting or checked traps, returned late in the evening, ate in silence, and immediately went to bed. Ellie, left alone in the unfamiliar cabin, felt unwanted and useless. She tried to tidy up, to cook, but everything seemed wrong. The food was bland for a mountain man, the cleaning superficial. She didn't know how to chop wood, how to tend a garden, how to survive in these harsh conditions. Her plumpness, which in Chicago was simply a cause for ridicule, became a real obstacle here. Every step on the uneven ground echoed with pain in her legs. Heavy work quickly exhausted her. Sometimes Jed cast disdainful glances at her as she, gasping for breath, tried to carry a bucket of water from the stream. He said not a word, but his silence was louder than any reproach. Jed's disdain, it seemed, hung in the air, and Ellie felt increasingly worthless. One day, when Jed returned from hunting, a fierce blizzard raged outside. The wind howled, snow flew horizontally, blinding his eyes. He entered the cabin, covered in frost, with a frozen rabbit in his hands. Ellie, sitting by the fireplace, shivered from the cold. Despite the fire, in that moment, Jed first saw her not as an unwanted burden, but as a living creature suffering from the cold, and something stirred in his heart. It wasn't compassion, but something close to it. He tossed the rabbit onto the table, and his gaze fell on the fireplace. The fire barely burned. "No wood?" he asked gruffly, his voice deep. Ellie flinched. I couldn't chop it. The axe is too heavy." Jed looked at her. Judgment was in his eyes. But then he saw her shivering. He sighed, took the axe, and went outside. A few minutes later, he returned with a whole armful of firewood. His movements were sharp, but now he no longer looked at her with disdain. Ellie felt that something had changed. The next day, she woke early. Jed had already left, but on the table lay, not unchopped wood, but neatly stacked small logs that could be easily lifted, and next to them lay a small, shiny, sharpened knife. It was a hint that Ellie understood. She took the knife and began to chop small branches she found in the yard. It was difficult, but she managed. Gradually, Ellie began to settle in. She learned which berries could be gathered in the forest, how to dry herbs, how to mend clothes. She wasn't strong, but she was surprisingly resourceful. She even made a simple trap for small rodents, using knowledge she had read in old books. Jed, watching her, began to feel a strange sensation. It was something more than just an absence of disdain. It was compassion. He began to see her not just as a plump, clumsy woman, but as a person who was desperately trying to survive and be useful. One day, when Jed returned from hunting, he found Ellie sitting by the fire, treating his injured hand. He hadn't noticed he'd cut himself. You hurt yourself," she said softly, her fingers light and deft. "I know how to heal. My grandmother, she was a healer." This was the first time she told him something about her life, about her past. Jed, looking at her focused face, felt something thawing inside him. His icy heart, which had been closed for so many years, began to open. Ellie was not just a mail-order bride. She was a person with a soul, with a story, with her own pain. And at that moment, the first, faint, but very important feeling of compassion arose in him. Life in the cabin slowly but surely changed. Jed, though still taciturn, began to notice Ellie. He no longer looked at her with disdain, and sometimes even caught himself seeking her gaze. Ellie, in turn, blossomed. She was no longer a frightened city girl. She became more confident. Her laughter sounded more often, and even her plump figure now seemed sturdy and healthy. Her hands, once clumsy, now deftly handled herbs, preparing medicinal concoctions, and her knowledge of plants and folk medicine sometimes surprised even Jed. He began to feel not just compassion for her, but something akin to admiration. One day, when Jed returned from hunting, he found the cabin ransacked. Furniture was overturned, dishes broken, and the floor was strewn with feathers from ripped pillows. Ellie sat in the corner, clutching an old, worn trunk. Her face was pale, her eyes full of terror. "What happened?" Jed, grabbing his rifle, instinctively shielded her with his body. "Bandits," she whispered, her voice trembling. They were looking for something. They said they'd be back." At that moment, anger flared in him, anger at these men who dared to invade his home, to harm Ellie. But along with the anger came apprehension. How did the bandits know about his cabin, and what were they looking for? Jed lived in the mountains, avoiding contact with the outside world. He had no enemies. Ellie, having calmed down, pointed Jed to the old trunk she was clutching so tightly. This is my trunk," she said. Here are my grandmother's letters. They thought I hid something else." Jed opened the trunk. Inside lay old letters, yellowed photographs, and a small, richly decorated casket. Ellie opened it. Inside were not jewels, but another small, but very old, leather pouch. She emptied its contents into her palm, several unusual, faceted stones that glowed with a faint but strong light. These were not ordinary stones. These were opals, and there were many of them. "My grandmother," Ellie said quietly. "She was a miner, and she found this. She kept it a secret. In Chicago, they knew she found something valuable, but they didn't know what it was. I inherited it from her. These bandits, they must have been following me." Shock pierced Jed. Not just stones, but a whole fortune. But why hadn't Ellie said anything? Why was she hiding it? And why were these bandits not just robbers, but an entire gang that had pursued her across half the country? At that moment, a shot rang out. A bullet whizzed past the window. The bandits had returned. There were 3 of them. One of them, tall, with an eye patch, shouted, "Well, pretty girl, found something to pay us with? Hand over the stones, and we'll leave you alone." Jed grabbed his rifle. His heart pounded wildly. He was ready for a fight, but now he was fighting not just for his home, but for Ellie, for her secret, for her life. He felt an instinct to protect awaken within him, one he hadn't known he possessed. This woman, whom he had once despised, had become something very important to him. A gunfight ensued. Jed shot accurately, but the bandits were experienced and numerous. Ellie, trembling with fear, didn't hide. Remembering her grandmother's stories of her mining adventures, she pointed Jed to a weak spot in the cabin wall. There's an old mine. It leads to the river, my grandmother said. Jed understood. It was their only chance. He covered her, firing at the bandits, while Ellie, despite her plumpness, with incredible agility, broke through the fragile wall, opening an entrance to an old tunnel. They had to get out of here. Their lives hung in the balance. They ran through the old, dusty tunnel, the bandits' gunshots echoing behind them. Ellie, despite her breathlessness, ran ahead, her memory of her grandmother's stories becoming their guiding star. Jed covered her, feeling the adrenaline surging through his veins. He no longer saw her as a plump girl. He saw her as a strong, brave woman leading them to safety. His admiration for her grew with every step. Finally, they emerged from the tunnel, finding themselves on the bank of an icy mountain river. The bandits, who followed, froze on the opposite bank. They hadn't expected such an outcome. "Stop!" the one-eyed bandit shouted. "Give us the stones, and we'll leave." But Ellie was no longer afraid. She looked at Jed, and there was determination in her eyes. "No," she cried. "This is mine. This is my grandmother's inheritance." Jed, standing beside her, felt his heart fill with pride. This woman, whom he had once despised, now stood before bandits, defending what was hers, and he was by her side. At that moment, as the bandits were about to cross the river, a rumble echoed. It was a landslide. The old tunnel they had just run through collapsed, cutting the bandits off from their bounty. Nature itself came to their aid. This was satisfaction. Jed and Ellie returned to the cabin. The bandits had disappeared, their fate unknown. The cabin was ransacked, but they were alive. The opals were with them. Ellie, sitting by the fire, looked at the stones. I don't know what to do with them," she whispered. "It's too much." Jed walked over to her, sat down beside her. He took her hand. "We'll figure it out, Ellie, together." Her eyes, full of tears, met his gaze. In them was not only relief, but deep gratitude, and also something new he hadn't seen before, love. And in his heart, which had once been icy, a reciprocal fire ignited. They sold a portion of the opals, ensuring themselves a comfortable life. Jed bought new land, expanded his farm. Ellie, full of energy, transformed their house into a cozy nest that became the center of their lives. They never forgot how they met, how she, a plump girl, came to him as an unwanted bride, how he, a grim mountain man, didn't want to see her, and how one quiet whisper, and then this dangerous secret, changed everything. They became husband and wife, not by contract, but by love, by destiny. Conclusion and lesson. The story of Jed and Ellie Mae is a reminder that a person's true value lies not in appearance or first impressions, but in their inner world, character, and strength of spirit. Jed, guided by prejudice, almost missed his happiness, while Ellie, despite ridicule and hardship, found the courage to fight for a new life. Lesson for the modern world. We live in an era where appearance and first impressions often dictate our attitudes towards others. Social media and beauty standards can make us despise those who don't fit into accepted norms, or hide our true talents for fear of being misunderstood. But the story of Jed and Ellie teaches us, don't judge a book by its cover. It's important to look deeper, give a person a chance, understand their motivation, and see their inner light. Sometimes, the very person we reject can bring into our lives the treasure we so desperately lack. True love and a strong connection are born not from a perfect picture, but from a willingness to accept a person as they are and to overcome difficulties together. Remember, sometimes the most unassuming stone turns out to be the most precious.